on ViDA. So I'm joined by two ladies here that are going to talk us through two pillars, and I'm going to hand it over to you guys to just introduce yourselves and your company. So Ruth, do you want to kick us off first?
Yeah, no problem, Lisa. So my name is Ruth McLaughlin. I'm the head of Ancestry's International Tax Department based in Dublin. So I look after the direct and indirect taxes for Ancestry. So for those of you that don't know, Ancestry is the global leader in family history. So we help people make discoveries in relation to their family history and from kind of some historical backgrounds around where they've been brought up and various different countries that they might have, their ancestors might have come from. So it's about 40 years old, predominantly online, but we have some physical goods we move around, which always makes it interesting from a VAT standing. We're predominantly B2C, so we end up with a lot of electronically supplied services issues. We end up with some import VAT, customs issues, and then some of the platform rules have quite an effect on us, which we can talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ruth. Anna?
Thanks for having me here. Great to be here. My name is Anna Tiusanen. I'm from I'm global head of indirect tax with Metso Corporation. I just actually been a part of Metso for 1 year. So we are headquartered in Helsinki, Finland, and listed in Nasdaq Helsinki. We have 16,000 employees currently in 50 countries, but our global footprint is in 200 countries because we have a lot of project business all over the world. So what do we do? Metso provides sustainable technologies and end-to-end solutions, and our main business lines are aggregates, so huge crushers of stones, and minerals processing, and then also metals refining. So we are globally supporting our industries there. As for VAT terms, well, we are both for selling for services and goods, but primarily B2B. So B2C is something that we don't do at all. You know, no one wants to have a crusher on their backyard. So we are selling big and expensive equipment, and we have quite complicated supply chains, which is of course something that is kind of interesting in terms of also how to report things, because we are moving goods around Europe for installation and assembly services. So.
Yeah,
very
so it's great, yeah, interesting and very diverse businesses. So it would be nice to hear from both of you the impact that this ViDA proposal will have. And just to talk a little bit then about ViDA and what it is and the aims before we move on. So ViDA has kind of three main aims and three pillars, as we kind of mostly know by this stage. But the aims are really to modernise our VAT system, because it's kind of a dinosaur really at this stage, and we need to bring it up to the 21st century. And we're going to do that predominantly, it sounds like we're going to do that through digital reporting requirements based on e-invoicing. And Anton Appel from WTS Global is going to take us through the detail of that in a few minutes. We are also looking then to fight fraud. So when we're talking about fraud, we're talking about missing trader, intercommunity fraud, and how we're going to tackle that. And again, it seems to be that we're going to tackle that by collecting lots of data. So transactional reporting, digital reporting requirements, cross-matching of data, reconciling of data, finding anomalies. So it really will be fighting the fraud after the fraud has already taken place in an attempt to combat the fraud. So we'll see how that's going to work. And then also just simplifying VAT compliance. So Anna will take us through the single VAT registration in a few minutes as well, and talk us through how that's going to simplify VAT compliance. And it certainly will if you can use those simplifications. So Ruth, we'll head back to you then, and if you could just introduce that second pillar, those deemed supplier rules then for the platform economy.
Yeah, no worries, Lisa. So some of you might be familiar with the platform rules. In general, they came in 2021 in the e-commerce space. So what it means, and it's been quite successful actually from the 2021, so they're just expanding the industries that the platform rules apply to. So what they're looking at in principle is for short-term accommodation and passenger transport, they're putting the onus from a VAT standing on the platform in the middle. So think Airbnb, think Uber. So what's happening is where the underlying supplier isn't registered for VAT, the tax authorities are looking to the platform and saying, you are now the deemed supplier for this sale. So what that requires is, in a scenario where the underlying provider, the Uber driver, the person that has the short-term accommodation isn't VAT registered, so that the tax authorities then look to the platform and say, you need to charge VAT on the supply to the end user. So in historically, these wouldn't have been subject to VAT, and from an underlying standpoint, a lot of the suppliers aren't necessarily required to be registered for VAT, which is quite interesting. So there's a couple of nuances around it. It's been very successful for them in the e-commerce space. It was introduced in 2021, so I don't think anyone's surprised to see it expanded to different industries. But in what variation we end up with it in the final version will be interesting.
Yeah, and we've heard just from attending conferences and hearing feedback, there's a lot of pushback from the platform economies, I suppose, because it's just another thing that they are being made responsible for. And the Commission say that it's to address unjustified distortion of competition. Maybe you kind of explain that in the fact that these underlying suppliers wouldn't be required to be VAT registered in some cases, but because they are facilitated by a platform, they are now competing with fully taxable businesses like hotels and things. So this is the unjustified distortion of competition that we're talking about.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because like you spoke about the aims of ViDA, right? It's to close this VAT fraud gap, right? And it's to level the playing field. But historically, these small suppliers, don't meet the threshold requirements to register for VAT, or aren't necessarily operating in a business capacity, so don't have the rights to register for VAT. So if you compare what they're supplying to the end user under the traditional rules, they're not required to be registered for VAT. So it seems a little peculiar, and I can understand why the platforms are a little put out, frankly, that instead of the tax authorities looking to change those kind of historical rules they have around registration thresholds, that they're just saying, well, I don't want to chase all the small people, I'll just make the platform responsible for it.
So the platforms have the technology, they have the capability because they're already doing it. And so it's just extended to the platform economies, and then as a tax office I don't have to deal with the hundreds of registration applications, and and actually I've created this distortion of competition in the first place, really. So this is the point. And so I suppose we'll probably get consensus from the member states because it'll be popular that this will be the way that it'll go, but possibly not then from the platform economies.
Yeah, and like I said, we Ancestry sell on Amazon and a number of other e-commerce platforms, and we also operate a platform ourselves whereby we have people that sell to us, and it's easy for tax authorities to say, oh, the platforms have the technology to do it, they're bigger, they should be able to operate. But it's quite challenging, Lisa, to implement that type of a system. And also from a platform standing, we don't necessarily understand the nuances of the underlying business. So, we're making quite broad assumptions when we're setting up a system in order to be able to catch the majority of suppliers. But what's happening is that invariably you leave somebody out. So somebody might come and say, well, you're treating me as a good for VAT purposes, but actually we're a service. And given the tax authorities are placing the onus on the platform, we're being very conservative around saying, well, if we were audited, we don't have the ability to supply all that documentation or want to make that argument. So it's easy for the tax authorities to say, oh, the platforms will deal with it. But that's actually a lot more difficult than they think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what impact does it have on the business for the platform economy? Because if I book accommodation directly with the underlying supplier and don't use the platform economy, I won't be charged VAT. But if I book it through the platform economy, then my price is going to include VAT. So you're creating really another distortion of competition, I suppose, in the market. And what impact will that have on the marketplace business?
Yeah, and I think that remains to be seen, Lisa. But like you said, they're creating a distortion. They're trying to solve a distortion and level a playing field, but really they're creating their own distortion. And how much of that they've really thought through, I'm not necessarily sure. And this is probably one of the pillars in ViDA that will see quite a lot of pushback from the platform economy. And whether we end up with it being as it's laid out remains to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's great revenue generator for the tax offices, so that it'll be a really popular one for them. But yeah, it just remains to be seen what influence the platforms can actually have here.
Yeah. And you're right, because what they are doing in this one is they're bringing into the VAT net a number of services that were not and have not historically been, because the suppliers didn't reach the threshold. So yes, their revenue is going to go up significantly, but at the cost of the platforms. It's great unless you're a platform. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're going to watch that space. So there is a council meeting, I think on the 16th of June, where there'll be policy debate, and I'm sure there'll be some feedback on this pillar in particular. So we need to keep an eye on that one and see what's going to happen. Yeah. Thanks a million, Ruth. No problem.
Great summary. Anna, over to you. So we're going to talk a little bit then about the single VAT registration, and just to tell us what it's all about.
Yeah, thank you very much. So when one thinks of the initiative name, single VAT registration, that of course sounds really, really great. And when something sounds too good to be true, it often is. So this is no exception in my opinion. So basically we are talking of single VAT registration. What that actually means is, well, upgrading certain regimes, basically import one-stop shop and then one-stop shop, so that it would be kind of the field, the scope would be a little bit kind of broader. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the general idea of company being able to report all of its EU transaction, pan-European transaction, through one single registration, through one country, to one form, one language even, that would be great. And of course, it's a very noble and great kind of aim to forward to. But I'm, for instance, our companies that are doing business in Europe, they might have 20 different registrations. Mm-hmm. Of course, I would like to have that, minimized to the extent possible. So basically, reducing the amount of VAT registration would be very wished for development as such. But these this single VAT registration that we are now heading to is more for it's in more for B2C scenarios. So I would not say there are a lot to offer for B2B, but yeah.
So we traditionally the one-stop shop and the import one-stop shop are dealing with B2C model.
Exactly.
There are some elements of this proposal that might be beneficial on a B2B basis. Indeed. So maybe you could talk us through that, because your business is B2B, predominantly B2B based, or all B2B based. Yeah. So.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. So the main objective of this bill is to improve and extend, first of all, the one-stop shop, and then of course the import one-stop shop. So one-stop shop regime, as we know, with both of them were as Ruth mentioned, also for platform economy. So this also stems from e-commerce package 2021, or the current format of it stems from there. So one-stop shop regime is currently in place for supplies to consumers within the EU, and then import one-stop shop is then for importing goods to EU customers or EU consumers for parcels that the value of which does not exceed 150 euros. So that's basically the thing. And through these regimes, it's allowed for non-established traders to report only to one member state, and that's now to be extended. I would consider, well, there are a couple of things with one-stop shop scenario. Well, of course, our company is not using either regime for the moment. You need to register for those. So we are not currently using either one. But there is now a new proposal for one-stop shop, based on which you can apply for that for stock transfers. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is the thing for our company. So basically, we could move our own goods throughout, Europe, not throughout Europe, but basically from one European Union country to another one, without being needed to register in that country where we are shifting our goods. So when we are kind of manufacturing goods, when we are doing assembly in one of the countries where the goods are not supposed to end up, this might be a very good way of our kind of streamlining our reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ruth, you had mentioned this as well previously, that you have these similar scenarios where you're moving goods, maybe through Amazon or whatever the case may be, and so you find yourself with multiple registrations, and so this one-stop shop might be feasible.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping. I'm like Anna, I got very excited when I initially saw the proposal, and then sort of the more I looked into it, the more I was like, oh, will it work? But it should help us. So exactly like you said, Lisa, we move goods from country to country, normally in Amazon warehouses, sometimes in our own warehouses, and that's a sale from yourself. It's a stock transfer, a personal transfer, and exactly like Anna, we're finding that we're ending up with multiple registrations, which can be incredibly costly, and you can also get a number of questions from tax authorities, because you might move something. You might move something into a country, right? So you'll have a reporting requirement when that occurs. It may stay there for some time, so nothing will be appearing in your VAT return, and then you may have some activity again. So what you're kind of getting is like a lot of these questions where they're like, well, why are you registered? We saw some what could be significant activity in one period and then nothing subsequently. So it's also generating a lot of questions from their side. So I would think the tax authorities would be really pushing as well for a single VAT registration.
Yeah, and then when you think about it, it's also not about, actually paying something. It's also, reporting. You need to report that you move the goods to Poland and then you move it onwards to another country, but you don't need to actually pay anything. So when we are using one-stop shop scenario, it would kind of enable us not needing to register and file into local VAT returns to Poland, for instance, because we all know Poland. It's a little bit difficult when it comes to reporting of VAT, as well as Italy. So basically, we, for instance, I have been avoiding certain countries in Europe so that we don't need to register there. Not that many countries like Poland or Italy. So those countries might be a bit, troublesome in that sense. So if we can, push, but then again, there is very good assembly service providers and for instance in Poland. So we would like to do that. And then through OSSS and, there's too much, but basically through that regime, we could get it working a bit more. You
might be able to
easily.
just expand the scope of your business, or just through this simplification. So even apart from the monetary simplification that it brings to the compliance process, it might have some benefit here. But there are restrictions, right? So there are reasons that these simplifications aren't widely used. A big one that Taxback will be very much involved in is the input VAT deduction. So no input VAT deduction through OSS, having to recover your VAT through an 8 directive or a 13 directive refund mechanism. So how would that impact your decision then, Anna, to use it?
Well, that's a good question. It's just need to be kind of analyzed whether we will trigger any costs, for instance, in Poland. It might be that we are only Poland or other countries.
I think you like Poland.
It might be my favorite country for VAT of all. So basically, we should just analyze what to do, but possibly buy only services that are subject to reverse charge and so on. So basically, we've realized that with deemed supplies, it's restricted the VAT refund scenario. But of course, it's understandable, because then the tax authorities in your home country would need to actually know the legislation in the other country, and it would be we would be ending up to the discussion that has been ongoing for 30 years related to the definitive VAT system. I don't know whether we are heading towards that, but I hope that will come some day. It's interesting.
Possibly, we'll see.
I support you with Poland, because I told our business the same thing.
There was a plan to go into Poland, and we costed it, and administratively, Lisa, it was so expensive to undertake it versus the savings we were going to make there.
I will caveat, and other countries. The feedback was no.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't make financial sense. So hoping that the simplified VAT registration, the single VAT registration, will allow
Would
us
help.
to sort of unlock some of those countries that historically we've just been in a position to say no, it doesn't work.
And for Poland and some other countries, you know, and you understand it because, you know, the VAT gap is there quite different than, for instance, up in north with us in Finland. It's not, you know, magnificent. So I understand it in that sense, but
Yeah, and when we talk about the VAT gap, like we're not just talking about fraud either. We're talking about maybe avoidance or, you know, inability to comply sometimes, you know.
That's
and
true.
when things are made overly complicated, there is an inability to comply for a lot of businesses. So I think the one-stop shops will bring simplification for specific sectors when you're true B2C sales and you've nothing else going on. And we have seen it in our own business. It has created a significant cost savings for some of our clients. But then there are limitations, and we also have that other limitation with stock transfers with capital goods, that limitation for capital goods as well, that Liz might be able to talk a little bit about later as well. So yeah, we still have those limitations, and while we have those, but maybe we'll move to removing limitations as we go along. I don't think we'll get there on the input VAT deduction. The member states have, you know, point blank said no, input VAT deduction won't be allowed or included, and so we're going to have to rely on a refund mechanism, but maybe the refund mechanism will advance a little bit with technology.
That is true.
You would hope
Automation
so.
and technology certainly will come to rescue us. I hope. The more you can automate, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Anna, for the summary of the single VAT registration, and Ruth on those deemed supplier rules. So we are going to track these kind of pillars very closely. There are still moving parts there, really, is what the message is. And having a look at your business model and seeing if you can use a one-stop shop, because traditionally the one-stop shop is that B2C. It's for a B2C model, but as you say, you're looking at it now, and there are some simplifications that could be available for B2B kind of solutions, and we need to look at that and see if that fits our business model and if we can use it. So thanks, ladies, very much for bringing us through.